and are not playing here for week 6. And again, we start with the top 25 section of the quick picks. Here is the new top 25 going into week 6 if you missed Sunday's show. And let us begin with Minnesota heading over to the shoe to take on Ohio State. Number 1, Ohio State, still minus 24-point favorites going into this game against the Golden Gophers. That is crazy. I would actually expect Ohio State to be able to score way more than that. Minnesota struggled against Rutgers last week, but overcame at home, I believe, by a field goal difference. But here, they're going to be totally outclassed by Ohio State. There's no way in hell the Buckeyes are not going to be scoring more than, I think, 30 points in terms of, being the difference there at the end of the day for the scoreline. And then on top of that, their defense, which is one of the best defenses in the country, they'll most likely be holding Minnesota to a single-digit number. I would be very surprised to see the Golden Gophers score somewhere in the double digits. As we move on to Texas, heading over to Gainesville for a very tricky game against the Gators. Number 4, they're here at your Sports Outpost. We are obviously going with the long... Wait, did I mess up on that? I did mess up on that. Okay, I don't know why that's on Minnesota. I'll fix that in the post. It should be on Ohio State. Regardless, Texas, over there in Gainesville, we are going to... I think I messed up on a couple of these, actually. We should be going with Texas. I don't know why. I already have some mishaps here to start off the top 25 section. There's no way in hell I'm going with Florida there. I'm definitely not going to be keeping that pick. It was just a simple mistake. Regardless, Texas, I think it's going to be a tricky game. The offense seems to kind of be having a slow start here in 2025. I think it was a nice bye week so that they go into Gainesville well prepared. And I think everything is going to start to gel, I would say, this week going into the Red Rivalry game, which is next week against Oklahoma. We continue with some more SEC action. That is Texas A&M hosting Mississippi State. The Starkville Dogs almost got the job done against the Volunteers last week at home. I was very surprised that game went to overtime and that Mississippi State put up a hell of a fight. Very impressed with what Jeff Lebby has done so far, again, in his second season as the head coach. But unfortunately, I think they're going to be falling to Texas A&M, number 6 here at your Sports Outpost. Actually, no, number 5. In my notes, I have them there at number 6 for some reason. Regardless, minus 14-point favorites to start the week. It has moved up to 14.5 for the Aggies. And yes, I would say Texas A&M for sure is going to be winning this. We have Cincinnati hosting Iowa State, a game I was very surprised to see the lines. And again, we only use the lines to help us out with where this game might be going. And a lot of people think it's going to go Cincinnati's way. And this is one of those games where we're going to go against the grain, as the Bearcats are favored by -1, which is not by a lot. But again, Iowa State is usually in some pretty serious fights. I think they're going to have a hell of a fight this upcoming weekend, but will eventually pull away and be getting the big road win and continue to be undefeated, as that's number 7 here at your Sports Outpost. Let's go Cyclones. As we continue down, we got UCLA hosting Penn State. The Nittany Lions not getting the job done last week against Oregon in the big whiteout game against the Ducks. Well, they come over to the West Coast, down to Pasadena. I think it's going to be a nice, easy win there against the Bruins, who have been awful, just completely awful. Even after, I believe, Deshaun Foster left, they should have won last week, or at least that was the most winnable game for them so far this season. And they came up short against Northwestern on the road. They are not going to, again, be putting up much of a fight against Penn State, who are probably going to be thinking still of the Oregon loss, and they're just going to be taking it out on the Bruins. And yeah, minus 25-point favorites for the Nittany Lions going into this one. I would expect them to score a hell of a lot more than that. in terms of score difference. As we continue to move, again, I think I messed up on this one. I'm supposed to be going Alabama on that. Regardless, I'll fix it in the clips. Vandy heading over to Tuscaloosa, taking on Alabama. Minus 10.5 point favorites for the Crimson Tide. We did our in-depth preview of that game where we picked Alabama, and we're still going to be picking them here in the top 25 section as we continue to Kentucky taking on Georgia. They're in Athens, and I think it's going to be a similar case that we just talked about with Penn State and UCLA, but Georgia is the home team. And yeah, they're going to be taking out their anger, their regret of not getting the job done against the Crimson Tide last week with Kentucky. Poor Wildcats, as they're going to be dealing with that situation. Last year's game, though, was a little surprising. There in Lexington, Georgia's offense basically non-existent. I don't think that's going to be the same case here, as the Bulldogs are favored by minus 21 points. I would expect that scoreline to actually be very close to what is being predicted. Georgia's not going to be blowing out a lot of teams, to be quite honest with you. And I think that's just because of the offense approach. You know, running the ball a hell of a lot more, being effective there in between the tackles. Doesn't really score you that many points unless you're hitting home runs. And I don't think they're going to be hitting too many against Kentucky, but more than enough to, again, win that game at home. As we continue, we have the Provo Cougs hosting West Virginia. The Mountaineers, they're just having a bad 2025 in the second era of the Rich Rod tenure. Yeah, they got obliterated by Utah last week at home. They were wearing some pretty gnarly helmets, but you know, that's not where the game is determined. Unfortunately, it is, again, played out on a field and not on a helmet. But BYU had a tough game there in Boulder, Colorado. I think it was expected that they would have, like, again, some struggles there on offense. They started off slow, going 14 to nothing down there against Colorado again. But we should expect them to be bouncing back against West Virginia. It's going to be kind of interesting because their in-state rival last week played them, and maybe there's going to be some competitiveness in how many points they kind of put on West Virginia. And then on top of that, their defense has been stellar throughout this whole season. It's the reason why they're winning games by holding on to teams. I would think last week was like the first week where an offense kind of, I don't want to say exposed them, because technically the defense shut out the game with an interception, but kind of had to really kick it into another gear to make sure that they overcame there in Boulder. But we're going to go with number 11 here at Your Sports Outpost. They're favored by 18.5 points. I would think that's pretty spot on to where the actual score difference is going to be between them and West Virginia. So let's go Provo Cougs. Miami heads over to Tallahassee to take on Florida State. We went a little in depth again in the beginning of the stream for that one. We are going to be going with Miami. Again, that's another just, I don't know what happened with the top 25 section. I guess I put the W's in the wrong spot. Regardless, we should be going Miami there, as Florida State should be falling at home. The Hurricanes are favored by 4 points. They actually, I think, are going to win by maybe one more than that. So I guess they should be covering. Texas Tech heads over to Houston to take on the Cougars. Tech undefeated so far this season. They have been excellent. Nice win in Salt Lake City as they're coming off a bye week, going down again there to H-Town. Number 14 here at Your Sports Outpost. Give us the Red Raiders. They should be winning, I don't know, handily. Houston looked pretty solid up until last week. Looked like they were going to be getting their first loss in Corvallis against Oregon State, but it didn't happen. So, yeah, they got out alive, but I don't think they're going to be getting out alive here, as Texas Tech, one of the fastest scoring offenses in the country. They will be looking to get some early points. If Houston can stop that, well, I don't think it's going to be much of a difference. Texas Tech just scores very quickly, and there's not a lot you can do about it, unless, again, you make some stops and making it third and long scenarios. But yeah, Red Raiders, they are favored by 12 points going into that game. Oklahoma hosts Kent State. Yeah, we're definitely not going with the Flashes. They're going to get blown out. But how much? I don't know. I think it's about like 45.5 point favorite line for the Sooners. They could definitely cover it. We already seen Kent State lose 66 to like 6 against Florida State. They also got blown out by Texas Tech, where they actually scored a few touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken there. But here they're going to get absolutely again obliterated. But this is a week where John Mateer, the transfer quarterback for Oklahoma, will be out with a hand injury. He just had surgery last week for their bye. He won't be back, it looks like, for the Red River rivalry, but I don't think it's going to be that much of an asterisk towards them towards the end of the season. That might be their only loss. Probably not. They're probably going to lose a couple more games. To be quite honest with you, there's for sure going to be losing to Texas, but this week they're going to be beating Kent State by a lot of points. Purdue hosts Illinois. The Fighting Illini had an excellent win at home in Champaign against an undefeated USC team, where actually I think Illinois could have scored a couple more touchdowns there. They just, happened to fumble the ball there in the red zone. Here, they won't be fumbling it whatsoever. They should be putting the points on to Purdue. This offense has been pretty solid outside of the Indiana game, and I think it'll continue to be solid against the Boilermakers. If I'm not mistaken, this is somewhat of a rivalry game between the two. Fighting Illini are favored by 9.5 points. I would actually think they're going to be covering that. Again, their offense, pretty solid weapons, even though they lost 2 wide receivers and a running back to the transfer portal, wide receivers to the NFL. But Luke Altmaier has been able to adapt with his new weapons around him, and we should expect them to be pretty solid going into this week and handling business against the Boilermakers. We're going with Illinois. There's no way we're going with what we have on the graphic. Tulsa at Memphis. Interesting game. Tulsa, they've been interesting. They lost to New Mexico State, but then they go and beat Oklahoma State. There's a lot of weirdness going on. Last week, they lose to Tulane, another solid school there in the American. Well, they're going to be losing to another great program in Memphis on the road as well. And the Tigers keep on winning. They're favored by -20 there at home. Yeah, give us Memphis. The final game here in the top 25 section, we have Charlotte at 24, or number 24 here at Air Sports Outpost, South Florida. Interesting game in terms of where the lines are set. -27.5 point favorites for the Bulls. I think that's very possible. Charlotte played a decent game against North Carolina. Last week they lost in a weeknight matchup against Rice, where they almost had a chance in winning that game, but it's Charlotte. They're not very good in general. But here, I think that 27.5 point favorite margin going into this, I think the Bulls can actually cover there, and especially it's also at home on top of that, so it's going to be interesting to see if that's met. That's kind of the thing I'm looking at for this game, and I'm still very much expecting South Florida to be getting the victory there at home. And that's the top 25 section. Again, we're going to be fixing that up in the clips